And welcome back, ladies and gents, to Starforge. This is going to be really exciting because we're heading into the podcast segment right now where we'll be talking about the challenges in fielding talent for the pro scene. Of course, I'm going to be your host, Articuno. We're going to take this a little bit light right now. I don't know where the accent is coming from. I think it's from playing too much last night, but yes. Joining me today are our two guests once again. You might be familiar with them because we just literally had them like 2 days ago. Welcome back, Gerald Magic Sticks Over Pena, and I am scared to pronounce your name in Thai, so I'll just say Cabbage.
Yeah, sure.
How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing pretty great today.
Mm.
Yeah, because PCS on.
Right. PCS is on, and you should be very happy about your victory last night. I saw the
Ah.
chats. Lots of fun. How about you, Gerald? How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Actually excited for this podcast to end because I just learned to play Overcooked 2. So
Oh my god.
I just learned how fun it is to play with friends.
You guys should stream it sometime. But anyway, as I mentioned, our topic is going to be about challenges in fielding talent for pro. I know a lot of you guys out there, especially you guys from collegiate, for those that want to eventually maybe transition your career to the professional scene. We've seen a lot of collegiate talent, by the way, take that step. We've had, if you guys watch the homecoming, we've talked about Rays. We've talked about, my memory is so bad because we've had Zen, a whole lot of other guys that were able to make the jump back when we had the Green Up Pro Gaming series. But now it's a completely different ball game. We don't really have PGS anymore, so PCS would be an option. Of course, Liyab already repping for us. We're still looking to see if we could push for more Filipino teams out there. But if not, then maybe you might get to want to jump on board Liyab. But the question is, what are the factors that Liyab themselves are looking for when it comes to pro players? Of course, not just for Liyab, but this could definitely, maybe, just maybe, help you guys when making that jump over. So, are you guys ready to get into this topic? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of players really want in, but aren't really sure why they're falling short of the cut. Good?
Yep.
Go.
Okay. Let's go for it. So, let's go ahead and map out what the landscape looks like right now because um, at least for you and me, Gerald, we've been doing esports for quite a while now. We've been colleagues at Garena. We've seen so many players, so many teams come and go during the Garena Pro Gaming series. A lot of promising talent falling a bit short. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of them anymore. And for you, Cabbage, you've been around in Thailand for quite a bit as well before you transition to the Philippines to work with our own talent. So, but I think this would be more appropriate to ask of you, Gerald, since you've obviously been in the Philippine scene for quite a while now. So, what does the landscape look like for talents right now, as of present?
Um, well, I think there's still a lot of existing talents in the Philippines. It's just that the what we touched upon in our discussion from the last podcast is that there's very few avenues for them to actually show their skills. So
Right.
it's also not easy for us to to scout people that we want to get and join Liab without those amateur or grassroots level of tournaments, right?
Right.
So we're basing right now and in the past, especially for the Liab Academy, we based much of our scouting through word of mouth. Like we're gonna talk to the former teammates, former managers of teams. We're gonna ask about this player, what's his attitude, what is his work ethic. So, but it's still a different thing to see how a player scales or how his skills transition when it comes to stage time. It's a
Right.
different thing. It's a different measurement for us. So, but I do believe. I mean, just thinking about how we lost in the PPGL against a all Filipino team
Mm-hmm.
at that time, it shows that there are still a lot of promising talents in the Philippines. So um, right now, what we're trying to do behind the scenes is trying to be more concise when it comes to criteria and requirements when scouting for players.
Right. I'd have to agree with you though in terms of the limitations of how we can even review players because years back, every single weekend, this was when Garena Philippines was still up and active. We'd have a tournament almost every single weekend that you could look forward to, regardless of whatever part of the Philippines you're from. Those Timo Cups, those Lulu Cups. Um, if you want to qualify for pro, you had Rise of the Champions leading up to Piltover's finest eventually. But now we don't really have as much of that anymore. Usually, when you look at your newsfeed for a lot of these Filipino players, it would be all these tournaments happening. I look forward to this tournament, that tournament. I look forward to qualifying for PGS. But now it's mostly looking forward to PPGL, at least last year, because recently they announced their roster now, which is mostly mobile games. So, okay, let's go straight to the point here, straight to the topic. Um, what are some of the fundamentals, like right off the bat, when you look at a player? What are the immediate things that you put into consideration before taking them, let's say, to the next step of screening them even further? Why don't we start with you, Cabbage? Like, what do you look for in a player right off the bat?
Well, for me personally, I need to check on their their distinctive traits or like how their play style could mesh into our team first. So in order to field a new players into the team, if it's not a complete turnover of the whole team, it's going to be something that we want to like okay, for example, we want to play around mid side and then we are looking for a top laner. In the best case scenario, we won't want to be fielding like a superstar top laners who is going to like take a lot of resource to play, because the team goal here is just to like okay, we are going to play around top mid side. Why should we get a high resource player top side and then tin ourselves in the game and stuff like that? So for me right now, first we need to have a goal, as in okay, this is a place, this is a goal where we're heading as a team, and what kind of player do we lack, and if that specific players suits our style, then that would be the first criteria. Then the second criteria would be attitudes. I think this has become something that has been prioritized recently by us, because before we never took it in consideration, because we have never faced this kinds of problem before. We never thought it would like bite us back in the end. But then starting right now, we're like, okay, what kind of attitudes does this player have? We would be talking to like their colleagues, their like Magic Six said, like their managers, because I believe there are many Strong's player, but Strong's player with good attitudes, that's something rare.
True.
Because if you just go check in Philippine solo queue, I believe all the top 100 are strong. But if you just ask, okay, who among these are not toxic, then you would thin it down so much, stuff like that.
Indeed. And that's usually something that a lot of players fail to take into consideration, I guess. Like, there's without a doubt a ton of talent in the Philippines. Look at our server size. We have so many players playing in the Philippine server up until this day in comparison to every single country we have in Southeast Asia that's still up and at it in League of Legends. But attitude department is where it kind of falls out. Anything you want to add to that, Gerald?
Okay, well, as someone who's been part of the organization for quite some time, I've met a lot of aspiring esports athletes. um, but a lot of them are already ready skill wise. But the when it comes to how to adjust to a team based environment and playing with for different people with for different attitudes and personalities, that's something that's always up in the air for anyone who wants to enter esports. So basically for Liab, our recent structure for scouting players has been of course we're gonna talk to we're gonna let TG to this is for local scene, right?
Right.
TG is gonna ready up a list of players, potential players that we might consider. And then the first step there is we're just getting up the first hand um knowledge of well how they talk, how they communicate, um and what are their individual aspirations and goals. Because for me as someone who's interviewed a lot of players, it's you can easily know how high the competitive drive of a certain player is just by asking what are his initial goals. So I mean, some of the red flags that I've heard is the moment a player says that I just want to play, I just want to be part of the team, you would know that he doesn't understand um, the 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 responsibilities of being an esports athlete, right? Because it's not just about playing; it's all about being a responsible teammate, um, having a discipline, to train every day, and then to uphold the values of the organization.
Right.
So,
Given what you, oh yeah, sure, continue.
and then I guess one of the recent things that we've learned to consider is how does this specific player fit into our own culture? Like it's when I say culture, it's different for different organizations. Like this player might fit in a different organization, but not in Liab because of
True.
the kind of players that we already have, and then the system that have already instilled in the organization. So we've turned down some players who are you'd easily see that they're mechanically skilled based from their tournament results. But when we were able to talk to them, we realized that the way they view the game, the way they approach the game, doesn't fit what our own vision is for Liab.
Okay. Based on what you've said, it really sounds to me that it's almost like I'm looking at a job interview process, if you will, because there's certain skills that you need to have, which is, I guess, the mechanical prowess of a player. There's the aspect of professionalism, which ties in with attitude. In a way, would you say that people that want to venture into professional esports, like, should they almost look at it as though they're entering a job, similar to how other people apply for jobs?
I think that's precisely the case that uh, on how should they approach esports now at this
Mhm.
age. Because when gamers transition to becoming esports athletes, they understand that there's gonna be a lot of benefits, right? There's gonna be a monthly salary. There's gonna be a boot camp. So, considering that they're expecting to be compensated on a monthly basis, they should already know right there and there that it's basically a regular job where you have to work for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You have to be able to work with your teammates to reach the goals of the team. So I guess at this point in time for esports here in the Philippines, it's time for um, aspiring gamers to realize that it's not all just fun and games now. There's a lot of responsibilities involved, not only to the game that you want to play, but to the organization that you want to join. Because I think a good example for that is our own situation that we're basically representing to two entities, right? It's Globe and Meneski. So whatever we do, whatever our players do, in game and in social media or in during interviews, during media guestings, it reflects to the values of the organization and to the values that Globe and Mineski wants to uphold.
And I think that it's great that you mentioned that because people don't realize the gravity of what they're getting into.
Mhm.
I think we especially come from a place wherein during the earlier days of League of Legends here in our country, since we did have a lot of those grassroots tournaments going on sponsored by Garena, there's a lot of fun playing with friends, maybe as a team, or just for the fun of being able to play with other players and enjoy the game. But it's just a completely different ball game now with how esports has evolved, and people need to realize, I guess, based on what you said, that with the evolution of esports in our country, so goes the way players should be approaching how they want to get into esports, how they want to eventually transition to a professional career. Because at the end of the day, with all the incentives that you mentioned, the support that they're getting, it's a real job that they're entering. It just so happens that I think for the case of some of us, like me, for example, as a caster, it just so happens that I'm in an industry where I'm doing what I love. And it should be the same for these players. But at the same time, like you said, there's responsibilities that need to be upheld with regards to what they're entering. So, you know what? Given the things that we've been talking about, putting it into the perspective of the local scene, particularly, I'm pretty sure that for the different regions, everyone has their respective challenges. I think last Friday, Cabbage, you mentioned that one of the things that could be a problem in Thailand, for example, if you're looking for players, isn't necessarily, well, probably, of course, you want to still look at the players, but whether or not there's a pool to speak of, that's a challenge in Bangkok, right?
Yep.
So for the Philippines, Gerald, at least, what do you think are some of the misconceptions that players have when it comes to becoming a pro player, especially for us Filipinos? We have a few things that we might think in our culture is okay, but when you're getting on the job, it's really not.
But I think the first thing that I want to touch upon when it comes to perception for professional esports is when we were playing in PCS for Spring, and when we weren't doing well, there were a lot of players, there were a lot of fans, viewers questioning our eligibility to represent the Philippines, right? And why are we playing in the PCS? Why isn't this team playing in the PCS? Well, to let you guys know, it's not as easy as you might think, especially for PCS. There's a lot of resources involved. um, the strength of the team wasn't the only thing that they considered when we were invited to join PCS. Playing in a league format requires every team to contribute, and not just that's not uh, exclusive to just playing in the league and performing. That includes creating content, promoting your players, promoting the organization, promoting the league, and that's something that not a lot of organizations in the Philippines right now are fully capable. um, and I would connect that to aspiring pro athletes, that skill is just one facet of playing as a professional athlete. Your conduct, your discipline, your attitude, your mental fortitude plays a lot of factors for you to be considered to be part of not only Lia, but I'm sure for any organization that you want to join.
For sure.
So what I would like for people who want to be part of esports to learn is that as much as you hone your in-game skills as early as now, you're playing at home, you're playing you're playing at in your comfort zone. You guys should learn that as simple as toxicity in game reflects a lot on how you will play um, with your teammates, how you handle stress, how you handle losing, for to be specific, um, is a good reflection on how you will act as a professional athlete. So lessening those things, um, having the control when it comes to for example, playing in solo queue, um, will give you a head start once you truly aspire to transition into professional esports.
Fair enough.
And
Okay. Oh, yeah.
I guess Cabbage has his own take on what are the kind of small things that players already show before they even make it to the pro scene.
Right, definitely. Cabbage, if you may.
So for me, considering like transitioning from like a normal solo queue semi pro athlete into like a full-fledged professional athletes requires a lot of motivation, as in like skill wise, when you are accepted today you might be strong, right? But 1 years or 2 years ahead there will be some kids coming up new who would be stronger than you because he's just younger, his reflex is way better than you. But motivation is something that keeps you going, keeps you practicing like 12 hours a day, keeps you looking ahead and trying to be the better you each day. And the moment you lose grab of those motivation and like the reason why you're playing this game in the first place, it will just crush your career. As in like motivation in the games is not something that you can rekindle every time it's out, right? Because the moment it's out. You can't be expecting like, okay, I lose motivation today, I'll just sleep today and then wake up tomorrow hoping that I'll have another sets of motivation that would keep me going on with this, right? Like especially if you look into players in the major league, they would say that like, okay, their motivation is just trying their best to win worlds. But as of now, players from minor regions, most of their motivation would just be like to make it to worlds, something like that. And well, I won't judge each person's motivation because there's like different sets of personality and different set of mindset going on here. But you need to like keep those motivation up high and like, okay, I would never lose this motivation and I would never lose this love for the game, even though I'm going to face a lot of criticism, facing a lot of losses, because that's part of what is going to make or mold the better you in the future. So that's something that's pretty important too, because sometimes there could be a superstars, but the moment he starts losing, then he starts losing all of his motivation to play, and then he'll just escape from reality and then move on to another game, stuff like that. So those kind of player would never fit well in the professional settings. So
See, we can't hear you.
yeah,
Yep.
okay.
My bad. While we're on the topic, we've talked a little bit about the local. If you don't mind jumping for a bit, because of course, with the acquisition of Kurt and Rex, it's very clear that you guys have also been looking at international talent. So we've talked local challenges. How about for you, Cabbage? Like, can you, if there are any, were there any challenges in the process of scouting international talent? Because it's one thing to look at a local pool of talents. It's a whole different ball game when you're looking at a worldwide pool of different regions, figuring out who's available.
So most of the times when you're talking about international talents, uh, there's already a system where like there are agency for players setting up around the globe, not just in Korea. There are agencies in China. There are agencies in Europe, NA. So directly you can just contact those agencies for lists of players or potential players that you might be interested upon. But the biggest issues for teams that are going to fill those players, or uh, it's going to be a different thing for you to like, okay, you can judge their mechanics and their skill plays or their play style through their solo queues and their replays, right? But the only thing that you would never know how that player would be is their attitudes and their personalities. You will just be like, okay, this would be a guessing, or like you should be ballparking, or like it it'll just be a word of mouth from many players or many of their colleagues, like what kind of players is this guy is, stuff like that. And you would never know for sure how this guy would mold into like a 5-man settings, or like settings where they need to live with another 3 or 4 players not from the same region or country. So that's the reason why fielding international talents would be a bit challenging. given the time too, because okay, if you have like a 1 month scenario, you could just bring them in or like do mm, tryouts in their own respective server to see how they mesh with the teams in terms of like gameplay in game wise, and then if they mesh really well in game, then outside of the game in real life setting should be pretty easy to mold, because I believe that for most players the biggest issue is not about their personality out of the games. It's how the in-game personality would shift those like those misunderstanding and stuff outside of like through the game stuff to outside. So the moment you start fighting in games, you would also fight outside of the
Right.
game settings. But if you don't really like a person outside of the game, but you still does well inside of the game together, then that should be fine. That's yeah. So that's why fielding international talents, it would be wise, and it should be good if you have enough time to like try out them first, stuff like that.
Right. Okay then. So it's interesting to hear that there's these small differences, I guess, in terms of how you would go about acquiring players locally in the Philippines and internationally, but the criteria still pretty much remains the same. I guess it's just a bit trickier when you're looking at international talents because you could only really get a grasp of what a player's attitude is once they're on the roster,
Right. Yeah.
unless you just so happen to maybe have a connection with a manager or coach that just so happened to work with the player in the past. But other than that, you're pretty much blindly going into working with some of these talents and
Right.
only realizing what the problems may be once you're in practice and once you're actually entering the games.
Right.
Okay, so I kind of want to go a little bit on a nostalgic trip back a few years back because Gerald, we've had some great times working on the Garena Pro Gaming series, and
Yeah,
it's
indeed.
such a shame because there's a lot of lovable personalities, I think, from the players that have come and gone in the pro gaming series. But nonetheless, with the years that we've seen the PGS, um, we've seen how the teams have gone firsthand. There's been a lot of teams, a lot of players. Any pros and cons that you saw from these teams back when we saw them in action at the Garena office during those PGS days?
I think what we lacked back then for PGS is um competent coaches.
Right.
I mean, the skill level, the skill, the raw skill of the players are undeniably there. Um, Pretty much the whole PGS were were close in terms of skill, but the teams that with more discipline, with an existing coach, had a upper hand against teams uh with no infrastructure.
Mm.
And I guess it's a big reason why a lot of teams getting promoted to PGS back then had a hard time um like staying, not
Mhm.
getting relegated, because in the first the original teams in the PGS already had the luxury of having an infrastructure, having a system in place, knowing how the playing field is in terms of competitive level. So um when we started Liab, one of the first things that and even for when we're looking to partake in a new game, one of the first questions that we ask is, do we have a reliable coach for that specific team? Because we can get for example an ML team. We can get a
Mhm.
five great players um, that are able to compete in at least semi-pro. They have the potential, but we need to find a person that will harness those potential. So there were a few cases for Liab that we were able to scout these players for a specific game, but we just couldn't find someone to handle them We just couldn't find a coach that will take them to the next level. That's what I would say. So we ended up not pushing through with the project because
Hmm.
we knew that um getting 5 players won't be enough for them to actually live up to our standards as an organization. So I think that's what has been lacking um in not just in League of Legends but for the Philippine esports scene in general. Reliable coaches that are able to harness the raw skill of the Filipinos, someone who can guide them, someone who can instill a culture and a system for them to be able to thrive as a esports athletes, and for someone that can take them to the next level.
Right. And that's a really interesting point that you brought up because obviously with the conversation that we have right now, the coach that Liab has is Cabbage, who comes from Thailand. And just looking back, it's really hard to probably I could count by the number of fingers that I have um, in terms of how many coaches were at least decent in the scene on a local level. So that, and even I myself, like I wouldn't even, I've coached before. I wouldn't even say I was a good coach. I was still trying to figure things out when I was coaching before. And it's not really the best opportunity when you're thrown into the PGS as a coach and you're only just trying to figure things out when you're at the apex of what you can reach in the Philippines. So that does present the question. Our topic, after all, is challenges in fielding talent in the pro scene. So sometimes when we refer to talent, it doesn't necessarily refer to players. What also people, I guess, tend to underestimate or discount is how important it is to maybe have a proper coach as well. So that leads me to a question I have for you, Cabbage. What do you think is traits that we might want to look for when you're looking to acquire a coach to have on your team? Because I think a lot of people have tried to make the attempt, maybe thinking that, oh, I have a decent idea of what the game is. I could probably transition that to becoming a coach, or I was a pro player before. I have experience. I could probably use that and become a coach. But based on your experience, what do you think makes a coach good, or at least worth acquiring for a team?
So I believe that the first thing of a coach is just to like you should be able to like judge the raw potential of a player, as in like, okay, transitioning into coach's mechanic won't be a matter in this area right now because you're not actually going to play, right? But you having some knowledge of the games would be best here. And most of the time I believe that it's just like the coach is like the foundation of the team, as in like if the project or the size of the player is not big, the foundation won't be that big too, as in like the coach himself would know as much as his players know, in a sense that, okay, so you could be a coach since season 5 when you're at the height of your career, but when as the meta progress and you're like staying in the job as the coach, you won't have a first-hand experience competitively as an athlete in season 6. You won't have first-hand experience on season 7, stuff like that. So as much as you try to learn, or if you have your sets of um, knowledge that you want to try, you won't know much more than your players because those are the guys that will be giving you feedbacks. So you could be having a good strats, but if you give it to your players and they can't execute it, or they did execute it and they can't take advantage of it that much, then that's the extent of your knowledge of knowing that would that comp work or not goes.
Right.
Yeah. Then it also brings up to the matter of knowing how much your players can be or can become, as in like you must be able to identify the good from the I mean you must able to identify the great from the good, as in like there are many good players in the league, but can you identify what player would become like the best of the best, and what it takes for that players to transition from being a good to like a national level players. And as a coach, you must be able to accommodate those stuff for them. So if you're going to have to play around a superstar AD carry, you must know what kinds of team you need to build around him, and what kinds of criteria you need to fill in order for him to start becoming that player you foresee in him, stuff like that. So as much as I would say that a coach needs a lot of game knowledge, so it's something that it would help you in the end, but it would also help you more if you can do management stuff as in like, okay, you, because you're the coach, you must be managing their scrims, managing their lifestyles, as in like what they needs to do and who they need to be doing it with, as in like uh in Liyab we recently also tried to like create a new system where like there's a rotational duo queue.
Hmm.
So we won't expect AD carry and supports to be always doing together. So we want to create dynamics around the map so that players can play around with everyone on the team. So like, okay, this week the supports will be queuing with the mid. The next week he'll be queuing with the top laner, stuff like that. So the coach is responsible in creating this system, creating a culture within the team that would uh, help that team be the best, like bring out the best in them, because each and every teams have a different sets of problem, as I've said, and it's the coach duty to like identify what's the problem or are, and then trying to solve them. Yep.
Okay. Before I continue the discussion, of course, we'd like to welcome everybody that's tuned in once again to Starforge. Later on, we'll be having our community matches where you will get the chance to compete against some of our players from Liyab Esports and get also, as an additional bonus, should you win a shot at the 7,500 RP prize pool that we have, which will pretty much winner takes everything. So 7,500 RP prize pool only go into the winners. So later on, we'll be announcing who will be joining our community match later. Hopefully, you guys are still online and in this podcast because I will be calling you on very soon, along with our casters, Uomi and Berserk. So this leads me to another question because challenges in fielding new talent in pro isn't necessarily just the process of acquiring players. Part of the challenge comes in when you're actually in the screening or when they're actually on the roster. So, with everything that we've talked about, and also from what I've observed when we were still in the Garena Pro Gaming series, sometimes players come in mechanically gifted. They have all the drive in the world to compete. But sometimes there's other things. This is probably going a little bit more deeper, but we're not going to go too deep into it. Just a quick touch up, but just the mental of competing, or maybe other factors outside of the game, outside of the team that suddenly creep up on them and affect them. So that said, in line with coaching, because if you look at some of the other organizations, they not only have analysts, they not only have the coaches that join them during drafting, but some go the extent of life coaches, of acquiring life coaches to help the players. For Liab Esports, how important do you think this is in making sure that you have a healthy team environment?
Well, for me personally, I think it's super important because having a life coach would also guarantee that the player would always be in an optimal mental state to play. Because, well, there's an extent where the in-game coach or like the head coach can go and do their duty. Sometimes there would be personal problems, sometimes there would be like family problems within their relationship that would creep into scrims, and that's something that us like a coach can't help to fix those stuff much,
Mhm.
because if we try to like go to the extent of like limiting what they can do with their personal life, then it's already taking advantage of their own personal space.
Right.
And this comes the part of like having a life coach or like a psychologist there to like help them cope up with either their loss of an important family members or like their relationship problems or like it's like especially personal problems that are like family related or stuff like that, that the team or the org can't interfere but could only help like soften down the blow on them. Yeah, that's super important too. And I see why many teams or many larger orgs are giving importance on that stuff.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think it's just one of those things where you got to give kudos to players that are able to, I guess, separate that when they're going into the game, even if there is something going on in their life. I think one of the prime examples of this is Double Lift, who internationally had this whole thing publicized where I believe it was it's a bit brutal to mention, but
Yep.
he lost a family member at the cost of one of his other family members doing it. But nonetheless, he still persevered in competing on the NALCS stage, and I believe they even got great results nonetheless, despite Double If dealing with that. And I think for you guys as well, like entering the PCS in the midst of the enhanced community quarantine that we have going on in the country, it's a lot to take in, especially given the state here in the Philippines. And just from the podcast that we had yesterday, seeing Kurt in great spirits, seeing Rex having fun during the community show matches earlier, it's really
I
interesting to
don't think he
see.
had fun there.
Oh, he did it. Well, I mean,
He got bullied by coach and
yeah, he did. I saw everything that happened. Oh man, but yeah, nonetheless, it's still good to see that even hearing from the players that they're still pretty much committed to, even after PCS, they're just there to compete, fulfill their duties as pro players. And it goes to show how important having a healthy environment is, I guess. Probably, sure, there might be instances where it can't be helped. COVID-19 is a very unique circumstance happening across the world. It's nothing like we've ever seen. It's bound to weigh in on everybody, but it really comes down to how you approach it, how you try to keep the ball rolling despite that. And it seems that Liyab Esports has got that down, at least from what we see in the public eye.
well, that's
Mm,
something we learned this split, considering there were a lot of internal problems that we had to deal with, family problems, relationship problems with the players, t- the situation with the enhanced quarantine. Um, but I think what we learned exactly is that we shouldn't treat the players as robots.
right,
I mean, we do expect them uh, to 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 shoulder on when it comes to like they have a problem, and we expect them to fulfill their responsibilities not only to their organization but to PCS. But I think it's cruel to expect them not to feel bad about it, not for it not to affect them and their performance competitively. It's another thing to require them to play, and it's another thing to ignore and to not recognize that they have baggages that they're trying to carry and not allow it to affect their performance. And I think
definitely.
I'm saying this for all the viewers and for all the fans that not only watch Liab but for any esports team that you support.
Mhm.
It's cruel to expect players not to perform at 100% when there's clearly something wrong behind the scenes. They're only human, and they do feel emotions, they do feel pain, they do get distracted by external things. And it is our job as the management, Cabbage's job as the coach, to to control those things and to make sure that they're ready every time they go on stage. But just like everyone else, they do get distracted, and sometimes they do fail to perform because something's bugging them behind the scenes. And I think that's completely normal and acceptable.
Right. And yeah, hopefully with everything going on right now, things I honestly don't know at this point. Like, how many months is it gonna
Yeah.
take where we have to deal with this pandemic? Every now and then I see hopefully glimmers of hope on my newsfeed whenever there is something positive about some kind of advancement in the vaccine or even just the medicine to combat COVID if ever you do get it. So hopefully soon, very soon, so that at least the players can get into better spirits as well and compete under circumstances that are much more desirable, probably as close as to when PCS was starting, when we didn't have this explode and blow out of proportion. So, okay, now that we've talked about the ideal traits that you'd want to look at, I think we go ahead and address the current players that we have right now on the Liyab Esports roster because I think with the traits that we were talking about, we're gonna go ahead and look at why some players were maintained because obviously being fresh is one thing, whether or not you have staying power in the pro scene is another, and then we'll also venture into talking about how we led up to acquiring Kurd, Rex, as well as Kanji. But let's talk on about let's touch on the players that we have right now. We have Exos and TG, Hamis, Kaigu, Doi, and you recently acquired Kanji for your academy roster. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, let's talk about the players that you still have on hand. So what led to the decision of just them staying on the roster? Again, we've talked about the possibility of looking at other players, but we still have these players on Liyab Esports, which I am completely for. But for others out in the public, it's a bit of a question mark as to some people saying, why not invest in the newer talents? So, what led to the decision of keeping these guys, and what qualities do you think they embody that makes them perfect for what Liyab Esports has going on right now? Um,
S- Okay,
oh yeah,
so for me, on why I require like I filled those roster. First of all, I would just speak of the core member first, as in
sure.
the three local talents on the main roster, which are Doi, EXO, and James. The reason why we need to have some kind of like an old older player or like veterans, it's for them to be able to help prepare rookies that we would bring in. In this case, it was Rex, because judging by how young he is, he's actually 1 year or 2 years older than Doi. I mean, younger than Doi. And acquiring Rex, he was not on any agency, so he was contacted directly, not through some kind of like a middleman. So that's the reason why we require older player, or sometimes an old player on the team, is for them to like transfer those experience that they have on stage, and or experience they have around the comp- competitive age they have been playing on, through these new players, because for what they lack of experience, they make up through mechanics, right? Those new, younger, and fresher players. So having this kind of like older, more experienced players like EXO, TG, Kaigu on the team, it would make this transition from like an amateur or a semi-pro into their pro career more easier and more smooth. And that's the reason why some of them are still here. There would be transition in the future, for example TG, because he already expressed that, okay, his next move would be transitioning into like the coaching side, and that's the main reason why he's still in the roster, so that he would learn, and then his transition soon or later within the year would be more smooth. So that's why he's still around. For Doi, he still has potential in himself, and I don't see any players that would be replacing him within 2 or 3 years. If there are so like that kind of players that would be here, because I think for Doi, what he make up was raw talent. He is strong. He is aggressive. He never feared any kind of jungler we face. Even though we are scrimming teams from, sometimes we do scrims teams from LCK when we were in the Korea boot camp. Sometimes we do scrim teams from like bigger stage like LDL, sometimes lower tier LPL. He was never the person who would be scared of facing any kind of teams. So that's one thing that's very positive coming from him, this fearless attitude. But yeah, it would take some time for us to like shape him into like the best person or like in the best shape. But from what we've seen right now, his growth is going up, and I don't see any reason why we need to drop him if he still can grow to be a better himself. And for James, I think he's a very crucial member on the team in terms of like his motivation, his work ethics, his work attitude is on point. I've never seen someone or like any person who would work harder than him in my whole career. So if you would have someone who you want to look up to in terms of like work ethics, then you need to look at him. He was never the first person to back down from challenges, and he was always the person who's like, if we lose today we'll win tomorrow, stuff like that. So he's like rock solid on those criteria, and based on those stuff alone, I would never be able to find a person that would replace him. So if you are a support main looking to try to become the next layup support, stuff like that, you have a big wall that you need to climb. And if you can climb over that wall, then I can guarantee that you would be a world class support player. Yep.
Interesting.
That yeah. Okay, you
Oh
can.
yes, sure.
Then I think I can move on to like the imports, the two
Yes.
imports. Yep. So we have Kurt and Rex into our team. From from what I've heard about Kurt through many, like from his agency, yeah, he said that Kurt's like a very good person out of game. So this is very true, as in like his personality, how he tried to like get to know every player, how he tried to get to know the culture here is very strong. And from what I've heard from the agency, he's kind of like a very mechanical player too, and his style is like he either break the whole team or he's just there on the top side, like stuff like that. So it was very interesting acquiring Kurt, because there are many challenges we need to work on, like how much resource we need to give to him and stuff like that. But that goes back to how much the top laner pool in Philippines is very low,
Hmm.
because we have also considered looking for local talents. Like, okay, what if we tried for a local PH top laner? Who would that be? Then I've talked with TG, I've talked with the players, and the conclusion was none. As in, like, we we have no choice to like get a local PH player at all.
Hmm.
And then we considered like C top laners that are in the uh, competition right now. We considered like we even considered our uh, peers in PCS, players from the former LST regions, stuff like that. But then we decided to go with Korean top laner, because most of the time we know that Koreans does not usually wants to come to another country alone,
Right.
because well, it would be another set of challenges that they need to face when they come here alone, because they have no one to bond to. If if it goes to an extreme case where like they can't make out a friend of out of anyone here, stuff like that. So at least they have someone that they could talk to in their own native language and stuff like that. But then going on to talk about Rex. Rex is a very talented player. He hit Korean Challenger when he was super young. He started playing League when he was 13, and now he's like I think 18 or 19. So his experience like started since like grade school, right? At 13, I still can't get my mouse and my keyboard working, but this guy's already playing League, stuff like that. So I believe that he have like a very huge raw talent that is waiting for us to explore. His personality on the game is very great too. He was very passionate. Um, every time we scrims or practice, you would see how passionate he is because he's either going to be the one who would call for the team to victory or he would be the first one to get like super frustrated. But his frustration never went past that one game.
Right.
So whenever we lost a scrim, he would vent it all in that game. And when the next game start, his mental was already reset, stuff like that. So he never took something in games into his personal life.
Right.
He knows that sometimes scrims can go wrong, sometimes games can go wrong, but he never let it affect his relationship with his friends. And that's something that's a very strong trait as a pro player. You can separate game stuff from real life stuff, and you always try to understand what the problem or and try to fix those problems. So I think Rex is very strong in that criteria. And other reasons why I brought him here is because I was trying to look for a duo for Doi.
Oh,
As in, like in the past seasons in LST, you would see that like this disjoint between the mid jungle role, where like the mid would try to play something differently from the jungler, and it would just cause chaos within the team. And based on how much importance I see that mid and jungle would become in season 10, and it has become something that has been agreed that in this season 10's mid jungle synergy is the first thing that teams must have in order to have a successful team. That's why I have this bet of getting a very aggressive player that would mesh up with Doi, and then Rex come into this conclusion and like in this problem, and I believe that they mesh well, pretty like they work well together, as you have seen in the early stage of the PCS, where like Rex and Doi complement each other playstyle.
oh, definitely. All right then. So at least we get a pretty good idea, and I mean, I've been convinced that these are the right guys to have to not only have on Liyab, obviously, but also just to represent us right now. And I would have to agree with the sometimes it's just really hard the shortage of players, and I'm not talking about, again, this is what we've been discussing earlier. It's not necessarily the shortage of how many players are there that fit the role, but how many players after putting in the criteria, like once you filter everything, like what options do we have remaining? Especially for top lane, it's definitely hard. And it does seem that Rex and Kurt were the right way to go based on what we've seen. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the Filipino audience is looking forward to how they play going into summer, most especially because spring, obviously, there's a lot of factors that we're just pretty unfortunate towards the end with COVID-19 just weighing in on everybody. So hopefully, summer would be under better circumstances. Gerald, is there anything you want to add to that, by the way?
Hmm. Are we at the end of the topic ba?
Yeah, we're already nearing the end.
Okay. I guess what I wanna say, Kab, I'm gonna speak in Filipino, okay?
Okay, sure, sure.
Yes, sige.
Um, yung pagiging pro player, hindi lang skill yung involved. Um, there are a lot of times na we've decided not to get one player even though alam namin na mechanical skill talaga siya kasi hindi na talaga pasok yung ugali niya, hindi pasok yung ideals niya sa mga bagay na gusto namin i-promote sa Liab. And one thing I would say na something na hindi akala ng mga players hindi namin kino-consider is how they act on social media. Being part of Liab, there are a lot of responsibilities in and out of the game. And that includes kung paano kayo umaktos sa social media, kung paano nyo ina-handle yung stress, kung paano nyo ina-handle yung mga losses. Um, and at this age, yung anything na ginagawa nyo sa social media may resibo. Madali lang sa amin alamin kung meron kayong uh, naaway sa Facebook, sa Twitter, sa Instagram. And that's something na kino-consider namin kasi para sa amin reflection yun kung anong klase kayo ng tao. Pero naniniwala rin naman kami na lahat ng tao nagbabago, lahat ng tao kaya mag-improve. So, if you ever come into a point na nag-a-apply ka bilang esports player sa isang organization, hindi lang sa Liab, instead of lying about it and saying na, mabait po akong tao, wala po akong inagrabyado, wala po akong ginawa masama kahit kailan, mas mabuti pang aminin na 3 years ago, naipag-away ako sa social media, naipag-trash talkan ako sa iyakan, na-post ako sa iyakan. Kasi that would show na na-realize mo na may mistakes ka. Na alam mo na may kailangan ka improve at you're working towards on becoming a better player and a better person. And that's good enough for us. I've been personally in a lot of situation na nag-interview ako ng players and I would ask that certain player kung do you have any history of fighting in social media because we're very adamant on getting players na alam nila kung ano yung responsibilidad nila bilang player outside of the game. Kasi nga hindi lang naman Liab yung dala namin pangalan pati Mineski tsaka Globe. And
Mm.
then there were a lot of instances na players would lie na wala naman po ako nakaaway. Pero alam mo yun, it's an easy
Mm.
thing to do na mag-search ng pangalan, alamin kung talaga bang wala siya nakaaway sa social media pero ang daling makita rin na ayun, 3 years ago nakipag-away sa iyakan, nakipag-trash talkan or nagpo-post ng mga nasty things sa social media. And alam mo yun, yung dishonesty pa lang right there and there is something na would stop us from getting you.
Right.
So, I think para sa akin yung skills, yung mechanical skills, alam na ng mga players yan. Alam nila na kailangan nila maging magaling para matanggap sila sa esports. Something na hindi pa nila na-realize is yung attitude nila tsaka yung how they handle themselves professionally is something na mas kino-consider na namin ngayon at this age kasi yun nga, anything na ginagawa ng Liab, anything na ginagawa ng mga players, nagre-reflect yun sa Globe at sa Mineski. And admittedly, hindi ko i-sugarcoat na kahit naman sila EXO, kahit sila Kaigu, dumaan din sila sa phase na, yun, nakikipag-away sila sa iyakan pag pinopost sila, nakikipagmurahan sila sa iyakan, at nang-aaway din sila ng ibang tao. Pero, na-realize nila at some point ng buhay nila na, alam mo, it doesn't bring anything good for them to fight in social media. Kasi, mas maraming magandang pagsayangan ng oras, katulad ng pagte-training para mag-improve. And I think that's something na I want aspiring esports athletes to realize na it can make or break the opportunity kung dun pa lang bagsak na kayo. So I would hope na sa lahat ng nanonood na gusto maging part ng Liab or gusto maging part ng esports industry, ngayon pa lang isip-isipin na ninyo kung ano yung ginagawa nyo sa social media. Kasi parang trabaho lang din to. Pag nag-apply ka sa trabaho, for sure i-cross-check ka ng HR kung, ano yun, may ginawa ba itong
Yeah.
masama in the past. And that's something na we're trying to apply na rin sa scouting. Kasi ayaw namin na kung kailan nasa team ka na, tsaka magkakaroon ng problema, tsaka magkakaroon ng away. Um, pinoprotektahan namin yung pangalan namin as an organization and syempre yung mga owners namin, Globe and Mineski. So, I would hope na you guys would be more professional bago pa man kayo mag-apply sa Liab. Yun lang.
Definitely agree. And just to add on to that, like we've talked about, I believe I've mentioned this during a previous podcast that we did not so many weeks ago with a very similar topic, but um it really shows when how a player present themselves, how much of an impact it has on not only the team but also in terms of the audience that supports you. Because like looking back, because I'm really big on following the storylines of all these players, what they do, what their journeys are. And I recall back in the PGS, Mineski, back when they were Mineski, they were just a team that was nice to watch, but I wasn't as hardcore in following them. But when eventually, like with Liyab Esports happening, with the players really working hard on just the whole 360 degree of what a player should be, I have ultimately become one of the biggest cheerers of Liab. And I wouldn't just commend the organization, but sina EXO, TG, Kaigu, James, Doi, TG, even now Kanji, like kudos to them because there is such an improvement, and it's really, like I always say this, na I'm always proud to have na buti sila yung representatives natin, because right now I would really love to see more players step up to the plate. It just so happens na given the criteria you guys had, it's so hard to support other players right now if you can't get into the mindset that we need in order for the Philippines to reach the next level. And I think both Gerald and Cabbage would agree with me. Sorry, Cabbage, this is gonna be in Tagalog as well.
Yeah, sure, sure.
um, ang dami naming gusto mangyari para sa Pilipinas. Sobrang excited ako na makita ng bagong talent sa league. Kaya lang, hindi lang siya pwede na mag-feed lang tayo ng talent. Kailangan talaga may effort din na manggagaling dun sa mga nag-aspire para we could see the next Exosense. We could see the next Doys, maybe the next Rexes and Kurds even, hopefully in the near future. Kapag kayo mismo mga aspiring players ang mag-take ng first step na maging palatable and worth acquiring, na mapagkakatiwala ng mga organizations to carry not only the team name but also yung pangalan din ng mga stakeholders na sumusuporta sa mga teams para marating nila yung mga level na yun. Hindi lang ng PCS, hopefully pati sa Worlds makita na yung team ulit. It's been many seasons. I'm very optimistic na in the future we could do that again. It's gonna take a while, pero darating din tayo dun one day. Tulungan, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. How about you, Cabbage? Any final thoughts?
Um, it's just for me, I think just try to work hard. That's all it takes right now. Because don't just think that because there are no amateur competitive scenes left or stuff like that, you can just like, okay, this game is dead or whatnot. The competition scene here is dead. I don't think league would be away within like 10 years or so. And just just think about this, that everyone here is always watching. We never considered not filling in 5 man local talents team. We have considered that, but given the situation, that's the reason why we goes against it. But I believe that we would never go far if we are expecting to bringing in imports always, like permanently. I believe that 5 local players in one team would be the way to go, and we are always looking into you guys. So it's never something impossible for you to become one of us, or like part of Liab, as long as you are continuing to grind and being the better, like being the better you every day. So yeah, just try working hard, and then I believe your effort would pay off someday.
With that said, thank you again, Gerald and Cabbage. But before I let you guys off the hook, we've had a lot of fun with the boys yesterday during our AMA session. So I want to I want to end this podcast with something a little bit fun as well. So you guys have to be a little bit quick on your feet, Will, because we're going to be heading into the community match after this. Um, for each player I'm going to mention, obviously we're going to go through all five, I guess. Yeah, let's six of the players that were fielded for PCS. For each player I mentioned, you have to give one adjective that best describes the player. It could be serious, sure. It could be relative to the topic, or you could go as meme as you want. with how you describe the player. If you need more than one word, if you need two words to describe the player, like eats all the food at the boot camp, whatever, it's up to you. Okay, let's start with who everybody is very curious about, Kurd.
I would start
Yeah, sure. And
uh,
whoever wants to start, because Gavich looks like he's really thinking about it.
competitive.
Competitive, okay.
Okay, yeah. Competitive, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
You know, any guy that has the free, not freedom, but openness to talk, to make their funny story when asked to be about his poop experience is all good with me. That just made my night last night. Okay, let's go with Doi. Doi.
Fun, fun.
Fine, okay.
mm, and one single adjective or a phrase
You can do
or
a
what?
phrase as well.
Okay. Dies before thinking.
Oh! Okay, let's go with. Wait, I need to get over that bit. Okay, let's go with Kaigu.
Oh, strong but scared.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Big Brother.
Okay.
Mga housemates. Let's go with the guy with who, according to the other players yesterday, has the most fangirls. Exosen.
I was thinking of
Hmm.
saying ladies man, kaso I don't I don't think that's appropriate. Magagalit sa akin yun. Sorry, Exo.
Well, you already did, so.
Sige, paninindigan ko na yun.
Well, most of my stuff are like in games related anyway, but yeah, I think like the first word that comes to my mind was stable, as in like
Ah.
consistent. But okay, ladies man also works if you want.
I'm gonna get angry about it. I just saw him pass by.
Oops. Alrighty, let's go with the shy boy Rex.
Troll.
Really?
He's a
Okay.
troll.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am
I mean,
okay.
for me, yeah, I would say the same thing. I've never seen someone be so competitive in game and be like reverse spectrum troll when it comes to approach of the game. Like if he knows there's nothing on the line, he would he would immediately
You-
troll as much as he can. To the
Oh
point that
my
to the
goodness.
point that someone as Doi who loves to troll also gets angry on
Oh,
Rex antics.
so he
That
gets
that
out trolled
yeah, yeah,
basically.
Yeah, yeah,
whenever
yeah.
they duo, Rex would do something so troll that even someone like Doi would get angry about it.
So it's like he's just getting a taste of his own
Yeah,
medicine.
medicine.
Oh, so he's met his match basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
Actually,
Let's go with our support Hammers.
great leader.
yeah. Hardworking. Yeah.
Okay. You know what? Sama na natin. Start with Kanji.
I would put hardworking for Kanji.
Ah,
Like
ah,
there's a lot of stuff in behind the scenes for him, and he always goes beyond expectation.
Mm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, for a guy who I heard yesterday during the AMA could most likely get the most challenger accounts towards end of season to challenger, you know? Definitely a lot of hard work involved there. And of course, our main boy TG.
Mature. And this is something that I wouldn't have thought describing him when I met him 4 years ago. He's very mature now. I mean, the progress he's been doing when it comes to maturity and slowly becoming the coach that Cabbage is molding
Mhm.
him to be is so fun to watch.
For sure. How about you, Cabbage?
Hmm.
I should have a different word
Well,
because you're working with him personally.
well, he's actually like the father figure in the team,
Mm.
but at the same time, he's like the big bro here, like trying to like, yeah, I'll just give him the big brother status here. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
Yeah. I mean, he's someone that any player has no qualms on going to and telling him his problems.
yeah.
Fair enough, fair
He's
enough.
the confidant of the team actually.
Ah, yeah. TG. even I noticed, I guess, like just observing TG from the first time I saw him during earlier PGS days to now, like TG, shout out to you. You should be very proud of yourself, man. So last one before we wrap up, swap cabbage and magic stick.
Ah,
Ha ha
describing
ha.
each other, right?
Yep.
Hmm.
Could be an adjective, could be a meme, could be
Could
something
be.
that just opens Pandora's box. It's up
I'll
to
go first. I'll go first.
you. Okay.
I think what I would use for cab is unexpected. Like for sure, a lot of people think that being a head coach means you have to be serious and you don't have to. You can't have fun. I would like to tell you that cabbage is mm, a lot of the times the source of like trolling here in the bootcamp. You can just see it yesterday with the way he he bullied Rex in the community match.
After seeing chat yesterday, I'd have to agree it was best.
He's the biggest
Okay,
bully.
Yeah, I'm
how
the
about
big.
you, Cabbage?
I have the authority to be the big bully here in the boot camp. Hmm. Well, for when like okay, the only thing I remember was like that Renekton game where he carried us.
Okay.
And then I called him the next top laner of Liyab. Wait, but I think he's fun. Yeah, he's fun, and well, he's I think dependable.
Hmm.
Yeah, so if thing goes wrong and stuff like that, I could depend on him to like help me fix it or like help us sort out of the problem. So yeah.
Okay. Alrighty then. With that said, thank you guys very much for this evening. Thank you for sharing your insights, and hopefully, to you guys in the audience as well, you guys have learned a thing or two about what it takes to eventually make the jump to pro. Should you be aspiring to do so in the future, it might take a few months, maybe a few years, but who knows? We might be seeing you very, very soon. Any last shout outs or messages, sponsors you guys might want, by the way, before I say my farewells?
Well, I guess I would just like to reiterate that there might be a lot of changes going to summer
Okay.
for Liab, and we would like to be transparent about it. So you can find updates and content relating to the changes in Liab, not only League of Legends but for all of our teams soon on our social media channels, fb.com/teamliab, instagram.com/teamliab, twitter.com/teamliab, and youtube.com/liab esports. We're gonna try to be transparent so that you guys would know why we arrived to this kind of decisions and why we took this player, why we removed this player, just in case. So
Okay.
please do support us in the upcoming summer split. Spring wasn't the end of the battle; it was just start of our journey in PCS and our journey to go back to Worlds.
Wow,
Salamat.
Thank you.
that was
How
a
about
big foreshadow. Yeah,
now?
he
I'm
just
like
did
my heart is like
everything.
thumping right now. How about you, Cabbage? Any final message or any people
uh,
you want to thank?
yeah, yeah. Basically, I'll just thank like the whole organization for like going through this and like working hard with us, not just the players and the management staff here, but like the whole sponsors and like the whole employees in the org. And yeah, to the fans, I would just tell them to look up to our summers run because we have a lot going on here, and actually we are doing everything for the best of the teams and for the best of our competitive results.
Alrighty. So with that said, thank you again, Magic Stick and Cabbage. I'll see you all soon.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, clearly not physical distance of each other because lockdown, but online. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Have a great evening, guys. Thank you very much.
Gracias.
And that was our Starforge podcast for today, guys. I'll be announcing the first six. Be sure to accept the invite within the first minute we invite you. If not, we will be inviting more people if you end up not getting into the room because it's full well sayang. So, Empbeng, WE Kaya, Shiro Nampion, Laging Talo, Hide on Bush, and JHC Overhaul kaya yung unang anim na imbitahan namin sa ating community show match. Make sure to accept the invite in a bit, and we will be transitioning over to our casters after a short break. This has been Articuno. With me is Cabbage and Gerald Magic Sticks over Pena, and we will catch you guys in a bit for the community show match as brought to us by Uomi and